It is time. It is time.
They can't beat the Packers. No. Are you crazy?
Welcome to the Packernet podcast. I'm your host tonight, JJ Lahey, and I'm joined by two of our esteemed hosts here on the Packernet Podcast Network. I got Jake Schyvinck, host of It's Always Draft Season. We also have ChatGPT, host of the Packernet Podcast, voiced tonight by Ryan Schlipp, as usual, since they still have not merged Siri and ChatGPT. At which point, we're all in trouble.
Yep.
What we're doing tonight is we are driving the hype bus for players that we think are underrated on this roster. I put a poll up on, not a poll, just an open invitation for people to cast their votes for players that they want to drive the bus for this year. And I didn't really define really tightly what exactly it means to drive the bus. But I think the best definition I have is that you are higher on this guy than most everybody else is. And you think that he's going to take a really big leap. And so you are, you're a big believer. And we're going to talk kind of about what roles, sort of breakout roles we see for the guys we're going to talk about. But I want to talk about some of the votes that were cast by some of the audience here. A lot of submissions just all over the place. I think pretty much everybody on the roster got at least a single vote. Some of the ones that I thought were relatively interesting. Ryan, here's one that I think I like the logic behind it. So Kenny Hansen on Twitter said that he's just electing the entire tight end room. He said they got younger and faster. Plus, J-Love already had a good rapport with Josiah. He says, I don't know if there's going to be one standout, but the position feels like it's going to be a more productive this year in the passing game. So I said, hey, can you just put your name by this and say that you think the entire tight end room this year is going to outperform the tight end room last year in targets, receptions, not targets, yards, receptions, and touchdowns. And he said, absolutely. Ryan, what's your reaction to that?
I think that's a relatively, maybe I shouldn't say safe bet, but it feels like a safe bet. There was a lot of trepidation about all the negatives that were going to come from losing these tight ends that we had. And if we want to talk about blocking or, blocking, then maybe we could talk about that being a little bit of a step back. But just from what, and I know it's training camp, but just from what we've seen so far, you can tell they want Musgrave to be a major part of the offense. I mean, that seems like it's going to happen whether he wants it or anybody else wants it or not. So, I think just from a yardage, touchdowns, the things that kind of matter the most standpoint, I think the tight ends are going to play a bigger role. And especially if you count them all as a whole. I mean, you take Musgrave and then you add in Tucker Kraft, you add in, if you want, Josiah. I don't know if we're supposed to call him just a fullback now or whatever, but either way, I mean, I think that group is going to be a bigger part of the offense than it has been in the past.
Yeah, there weren't a lot of targets going around last year. Robert Tonyan led the team in tight end targets at 63, which is nothing to sneeze at. I think that was like third on the entire roster. But after that, 15 for Josiah, 7 for Mercedes, and 5 for Tyler Davis. I think Tyler Davis alone is going to be, I would think, at least over 20 this year. It seems like they're setting him up for a lot bigger role than last year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and if you look at the yards from last year, I mean, Josiah DeGuara led the entire team with 245. So again, the bar is relatively low.
Let's talk about Samori Toure. This was a popular selection by Twitter. Dylan Oakley said he thinks Toure is going to get 500 yards and 3 to 4 touchdowns and come in roughly around wide receiver 4 on the team. Benjamin Bricko said Toure, in his opinion, showed great skill in the limited reps he had last year and deserved more chances. And so he thinks this year he's going to really show up. And then finally, Marlon Chamel is another guy I want to highlight. He said Samori Toure is going to break out. He's the best route runner on the team. Any 3 wide receiver sets, he will get the slot cornerback or linebacker lined up on him, and they will get cooked. Jake, what is your reaction to this Samori Toure prediction? Do you think that this sounds about right?
Well, I mean, listen, from an athletic kind of standpoint, I think Samori Toure was a really fun selection in 2022. Ultimately, though, like, I think when you look at how successful, Dobbs and Watson were last year, if you think the tight ends are going to be heavily involved, there could be a lot more 12 than we expect. But I do think when they're in 11, I just don't think, like, Toure has anything locked down at this point, personally. I know that it was a lot of fun to see him, kind of get under rapport with Rodgers on that one touchdown pass in Buffalo. That was really cool. Not taking anything away from that. But, like, genuinely, I do think, like, Dobbs looks a lot better as a route runner, got way better as a route runner last season. I think Watson's understanding a little bit more of how the route break footwork's supposed to go. And then they added Jaden Reed, who, like, is just tremendously quick and tremendously efficient. I'll even throw Wicks in there. I just don't think, like, Toure has definitively separated himself from anybody other than being, like, this kind of, like, he looks like he has easy speed. The athletic traits are fun, but I just don't. I'm not sold. I think I would have been more sold on Toure if they didn't draft 3 more receivers. I know they needed to fill the room out, but, like, second round grabbing a guy after you've gone second round, fourth round, and both guys contributed, to me that signals, like, okay, these day 3 guys, they're probably not going to get too much run unless somebody gets hurt, and I think they really like Jaden Reed. I think we're going to get to that.
Let's do it right now. Jaden Reed received at least 4 votes. I'm going to admit I ran out of time before we started recording to grab all the submissions by the audience, but I got about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of them. Jaden Reed, this is Derek Poole Nation. Jaden Reed looks to be the most ready wide receiver out of all the kids. I'm assuming he's talking about the rookies, but maybe he's just talking about the wide receiver room. They're pretty young in there. He said he brings a lot of skills. Eric Rivera said he wanted to nominate the whole receiving core. I made him narrow it down, and he picked Jaden Reed. Said he thinks he's going to get 534 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then I'm not going to read this guy's. Oh, whatever. I'll read it. Favre is a criminal on Twitter.
I mean,
didn't expect it. All right.
I'm not. He's not underrated, but I'm personally super excited to see what happens with Reed this year. What do we think? Jaden Reed right now is like 6th on the first official wide receiver depth chart that was released earlier today, behind Samori Toure and I think Dontavian Wicks and Bo Melton. Yeah, so 6th. Brian, do you think that Jaden Reed is going to start making inroads in this offense before week 1, or is this something we're going to have to really exercise some patience with and wait for them to work him in more and more over the course of the season?
I expect him to be wide receiver 3 by week 1 is my expectation. We'll see what happens. The depth chart did surprise me a little bit, but again, I think there's maybe some politicking and stuff going on there. I have similar feelings with Lucas Van Ness. Especially when we started training camp and he was like edge 5, and I'm like, get out of my face with this nonsense. There's no way. But yeah, I mean, as far as some of the specific, expectations for yardage, we've had a couple people now who are putting some pretty lofty numbers on it. I mean, 500 is definitely doable, but we got to understand if you're at about 500, you're probably wide receiver 2. So, if we're saying Samori Toure going back 1 is going to be wide receiver 4 at 500, holy cow, we're crushing it on offense. But no, I think Reed is going to be number 3, and I think he's going to be a big contributor, and I'm pretty excited about him.
Jake, the NFL draft is kind of your thing. Can you talk to us about, your observations of Jaden Reed at MSU and, what you think that can tell us about what he's going to be doing this year and how he's going to be fitting into the Matt LaFleur offense as a rookie?
I think what's honestly truly exceptional to look at with Jaden Reed is I don't think you have to pigeonhole him, which is a really fun thing, because I think when you look at last year, I think there's a couple things that jump out. And I know it wasn't his better year. I think obviously 2021 passing the 1,000-yard mark, being really a focal point on that offense. But I will say is, for a guy who's, 5'11", 187, 77% of the time he was out wide. And when you think about those type of receivers, you think, okay, they're just pigeonholed to the slot. And a lot of receivers in the draft were kind of slot receivers most of their career. And then Reed was kind of like the one guy where, they called him a little bit smaller, but he's playing outside against Big Ten corners, right? And the other thing I think is big with him is flat over his career, contested catch percentage, 100 is 50-50, completely straight down the line, 50-50 is winning the ball in the air, which for a smaller guy, I think you kind of look at that relative to others. You think, okay, wow, that's pretty impressive. For a guy who's 187, he's got to go above some 6'2" guys to make some plays. And they were giving him those chances down the field. His best, according to PFF, his best receiving area was deep, which is probably something you would not expect from a guy that size, a guy that quick, a guy that shifty, as impressive as a route runner as he is. One of the very few guys on film who I thought was insanely good at getting open at goal line fades. Normally you're not getting open on goal line fades. That's not a thing, right? You're kind of just positioning yourself to win. No, he's open. So how dynamic he is a route runner, but he also can win downfield. I think he had a 95 grade on deep passes in 2022 and then a 99.9 on deep passes in 2021. That's just unheard of, right? Those numbers are insane. So, and he's winning deep down the field with speed. He really has the full package. And then when you kind of think about all right, the Packers, what do they normally like at receiver? 6', 200 feels like normally where they go, especially early on. I know Toure was slightly under that at 192. They were rumored to be in an Olave who was in that range as well. But to kind of get outside the thresholds for a guy, I think that tells you one thing. They love him. They love the player. And this might be the closest thing that Green Bay's had to Cobb since Cobb was really in the prime years of his career as, a guy you can depend on over the middle of the field, get open in a variety of ways, win downfield. I don't think there's really a true weakness for him other than there were some, spurts of drop issues here and there. But man, you watched him catch the ball clean, especially that family night rep, right? It was just extending outside the window a little bit and making it play like that. I just don't think the combination of he does things in terms of winning down the field that Dobbs doesn't. He can get open at a high rate in the slot and on the perimeter. And whereas I think he's as multifaceted in terms of getting him the ball as Watson is, just a little bit smaller, more diminutive, it just kind of expands your options within the offense. If they're going to be a lot 11, I don't see why Jaden Reed wouldn't be out there with Dobbs and Watson.
Yeah, super cool. Let's turn our attention back to the tight ends for a minute because I want to get we led off with the whole tight end room is going to be great. I want to hone in on just a couple of individual dudes. I think Luke Musgrave probably is one of the more fun tight ends for us to talk about. Matthias on Twitter thinks that Musgrave is going to really open up the middle of the field, which is an area that he says we haven't seen targeted in a long time. He's going to be crucial to extending drives. I'm wondering if anybody on this call feels confident in putting Luke Musgrave in the top 3 or 4 most targeted players on the offense this year. You want to take the over or under on number 3 in targets on the team?
Whew. I was ready to jump in and say, I'm comfortable with 3rd, but then you add in, you still got Aaron Jones and whatnot in there. There's a lot of bodies, but I think there's a good chance that he could be in the top 3. With it being Watson, Dobbs, and Musgrave.
Tucker Kraft is also getting a lot of love on Twitter. Says he may not be the most delicate route runner yet, as though he's going to become a delicate route runner. I don't know if I want a delicate tight end anyways. he's not the most delicate route runner that we've seen in Musgrave. Weird wording, but he has good hands, a lot of blocking skills, and great rack ability. He's a hard worker and a prototypical tight end build. Lynn said Tucker Kraft has great intangibles, love his drive. He and Luke will be the 2 starting tight ends before too long. Sorry, Josiah. If he gets playing time, I think he'll be an amazing compliment to Luke. He won't get the catches, but he will be impressive. I think we are anticipating that the path to playing time probably for Tucker Kraft in year 1 is going to be as a blocker, just because they need a tight end who can do that. And, I don't think anybody's under any delusion that that's going to be Luke Musgrave. It's just not what he is. Is Tucker Kraft going to have an impact as a rookie? It's not common for young tight ends to make any inroads for the first couple of years. Jake, do you think that Tucker Kraft is going to get any substantial playing time, or are we going to need to wait till year 2 or 3 to see him on the field a lot?
As one of the bigger Tucker Kraft fans that there was, during the draft process.
Why do you think I called you out?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think that will depend upon that, I think, is how the Packers are viewing Tyler Davis, because I think it's very clear that Davis is on the roster for obviously, special teams blocking. That's a big part of what he's doing as well. But I also think, like, if they're big on the fact that, okay, well, we want to be in 12 a lot, I do think that gives Musgrave obviously the front running spot to be that sort of move F tight end who plays maybe a little bit more wing when they go, double to one side, and be that guy who's going to stretch the field. So if they like Davis a lot and they think, well, obviously I will say this, there's nothing delicate about Tucker Kraft, which is a great thing. He plays nasty. I think it's just, he's making the jump from the FCS to the NFL, and that's a big jump to make. All credit to Watson for making a lot of things happen in that jump last season. But I think blocking against, FCS defensive ends and NFL defensive ends is going to be a big jump for him. I think he can get there. He plays tough. He was a running back coming into college. He's very elusive after the catch. But I think it might just take some time. And like you said, JJ, it's not something that, tight ends just burst on the scene and make a giant impact. Kelsey had nothing in his first season, nothing at all. Besides one game played. So, and that's, a guy who's going to go down as probably a top 3 tight end ever. Kyle Pitts obviously had 1,000 yards as a rookie. Evan Ingram had a big year as a rookie. Those guys, what were they? I mean, they were refined receivers at the tight end position, not sort of more multifaceted guys who are going to hopefully, take a leap by year 2, year 3. So I think just got to temper him a little bit on Kraft. I'm still all the way in. But I do think for more receiving types like Musgrave, there's just much more early access to getting onto the field because of the skill set. I think Kraft can get there. I just don't see it in year 1.
We are working our way toward the players that we are going to be driving the bus for. But along the way, there are a couple of categories of players that you just don't find anywhere in the predictions from Twitter. I think we had like 73 submissions. One is you don't see many old guys in here. It's all young dudes. You're talking, year 3 or younger on the team is most of the submissions. But you also don't see any offensive linemen. There's only one offensive lineman who had any. Oh, sorry, there were 2. I forgot about the other guy. There were 2 offensive linemen who both received submissions, but one of them was just a photo of Sean Ryan, so I'm not really going to count it. Have you seen the photo of him? He's like on the practice field, like on all fours, doing like a sexy pose. That's the picture they submitted.
Oh,
so the one real submission for offensive line. Do you guys, either of you have a guess who you think it would be?
I mean,
Tom.
Yeah, it's got to be.
Zach Tom will start most, if not every game somewhere on the line, says Rube Gray. He'll be 2020 Elton Jenkins-esque. My hope is at center, but I think he's going to make it hell for them to sit him no matter what position. I don't believe he'd be a great guard, so looking to see him at right tackle or center specifically. My contention has always been, if he's the best right tackle on the team, which I think he is, then I don't really have any interest in playing him at center. I think we have other guys who can play center. I'd rather see him at right tackle if he's the best right tackle. Do you guys think that he is going to win that right tackle job? And if so, is he going to live up to the hype? Or, is it kind of one of those, he's the shiny toy and we're, not accustomed to the bumps and bruises and imperfections that we're going to see as we get more of him?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm considering I was a big Zach Tom fan in the draft and was banging the drum. I feel like I'm kind of getting on the other side of it a little bit. The hype train has kind of passed me. I like Zach Tom. I'm really, really hopeful that he can be an elite right tackle, but it almost seems like the fan base feels like it's a foregone conclusion at this point, and I don't think that it is. I think he was good. I think there's plenty of reason for optimism, but it's entirely possible he just ends up being not super great. Maybe he gets kicked inside and can get a second chance there if it doesn't work out, but it's still a question mark. So I like him. I'm excited for him. I do think he's going to win the right tackle spot. I think that's going to be the case. How good of a right tackle is he going to be? I don't actually know. I wish I could say I was the biggest Zach Tom fan, but I think, like I said, the fan base has just blown right past me on that one.
At one point, you were the biggest Zach Tom fan.
I used to be, dang it.
Then it got cool to be a Zach Tom fan.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to do it anymore.
Cool. Yeah.
Ryan, were you the emo kid in school? I know it was a little bit before your time, but
No, it wasn't emo. It was different. I had the big black baggy jeans and the Metallica t-shirt, but it wasn't emo.
Let's talk about the two guys on the roster who I would consider part of the old folks group, just in comparison to the other players who got submissions. First, Devondre Campbell, not a huge surprise, but he got 2 votes. Tyler Dershel said that he's going to be all pro again. I love this because it's a specific. This is what I was asking for in my thread. I said, I want specifics. Give me the stats. Give me the postseason awards that you think these guys are going to be pushing for. This is something real concrete that we can measure and say, hey, was your prediction spot on? Did you have that clairvoyance? Devondre Campbell, a little bit of a step back last year compared to his first year with the Packers. What direction is he going to be trending this year, Jake? Is he going to, kind of be more who he's always been throughout his career? Is it going to be either just a repeat of last year or a continued downward trend, or are we going to see any sort of a resurgence?
I think it's going to be very difficult to replicate 2021. I think that is just, something that is near out of this world in terms of what the performance was. I mean, he was just everywhere. Every time the defense needed something, it was like, okay, Campbell, or I guess Douglas as well. Like, it was like one of those two, make something happen, please. And he answered the bell time and time again. Last season, I know he has talked about this. He dealt with injuries. I specifically one of them, I forget what it was. I think he does bounce back. I don't think it will be to the level that he was in 2021. I think that's just asking a little bit too much. There just aren't many guys who put like multiple seasons in a row at a position like that, like at that level. But I do think a bounce back is going to happen. I think he's just so dang smart and just knows where he needs to be in coverage and in the run fits. I just don't think I think he's going to be more motivated than anybody, honestly. I'm not sure there's going to be any single player on the team more motivated than him this year. Maybe Douglas is the other one. Like, honestly, like I genuinely believe like he's ready to come back with force. All pro. I maybe could see second team. I wouldn't rule that out. But I love the bold play that this response was. But I do think the bounce back is going to happen. I just don't think it'll be to the degree that maybe some people will expect.
Speaking of Douglas, I was shocked he did not receive a single vote. I thought, with being such a fan favorite, you'd have some people who are like, dude, this is my guy. You just wait and see what he's going to do. But no votes for Douglas. With Devondre, what I was really disappointed with last year was the tackling. The tackling is what made him so special in 2021. He was the best tackling linebacker, or the second best tackling linebacker in the NFL, and that part of his game I felt kind of evaporated last year, and I didn't think the rest of what he did really took a big step back. It was just the tackling had been so special in 21, and it went to, average to meh in 2022. And you saw the whole defense kind of sucked at tackling more than they had in 2021. If they can trend in a better direction in terms of tackling, I don't know that, the rest of Devondre's game fell off that much compared to the previous year. I think that having even close to the level of tackling he had in 21, I think would put him right back up there with some of the best linebackers in the NFL. Let's talk about, we did Sean Ryan and his sexy pose. Let's talk about Isaiah McDuffie. This was a guy that I was really close to taking when we were reserving who we were going to be driving the bus for between the three of us. Christopher Carlick said, Isaiah McDuffie always leads the team in tackles when he plays. I didn't fact check that, but Christopher, I'm going to take your word for it. Sounds like a good stat. He has looked very good in camp thus far. I don't think he starts this year unless injury were to occur, but next year he may supplant Devondre if the Packers choose not to keep him around. I got to say, I kind of agree with everything that you just said right there. McDuffie has been really surprising me a lot, pleasantly, so far this preseason. And yeah, it's preseason. You get these guys who just, break out in the preseason and look great and can't do it in the regular season. But I feel like last year when McDuffie played, it was surprisingly adequate. Like you didn't feel like there was this gaping problem at linebacker, and the likelihood that you're the first guy up after an injury is going to have to play, pretty likely that he is going to get some reps out there this season. I like having McDuffie on the team. I think he and Eric Wilson really form a nice backup tandem that I have a lot of confidence in. I mean, obviously you don't want to be without your starters, but every team is going to be without starters at a lot of important positions throughout the course of the year. You could do a lot worse than Isaiah McDuffie. So I like driving the bus for McDuffie. I feel really confident he's going to make the team. Either of you guys have any thoughts on McDuffie, positive or negative, that you want to either hop on the bus or get out of the way?
Yeah, McDuffie and Wilson, I think, would both be great ones to pick as far as driving the bus for. I think one of the only reasons I wouldn't want to is just because they probably won't get a ton of playing time. There won't be a ton to measure. I wouldn't even know exactly where to begin with that. But no, I think that's actually a good point. I hadn't really even considered, Campbell leaves. It's certainly not a foregone conclusion we're going to draft, a first or second round linebacker. We probably won't. So, you take a few mid to late round swings, and in the meantime, McDuffie's probably our guy for however long it takes until they find someone else, if they find someone else. So, yeah, I think that is a good point that we may have McDuffie as the future at linebacker with Quay as sort of that number one. And like you said, I'm okay with it. Every time he's been on the field, limited action, but I've been impressed with him. He's extremely aggressive. I think he plays, whereas some of the time you feel like Quay kind of left something in the tank, like he's got more that we're just not seeing. McDuffie showed more than I felt like he had. So, no, I like both of those guys, special teams especially, but when they get on the field, they really don't feel like a liability, and that's honestly all I'm asking for as a linebacker.
Is McDuffie... Oh, go ahead, Jake.
I was going to say, I think it's a really good point to bring him up for next year. I think that's a really good shout for 2024. I really do. Other than I think like the Eagle game, which again, containing Jalen Hurts and the run game that the Eagles present and the conflict that they present in the running game, that's difficult for anybody. So I think it's fair to be like, all right, well, that's a rough game. It's tough to deal with. Other than that, I think honestly he played pretty well, especially as a tackler. I think he was just pretty much rock solid. So unless they're next year, they're bringing in Cooper DeJean to play linebacker, then I think, I think it's a good shout for 2024.
Are all three of us Cooper DeJean fans right now? I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty sure.
I think it's safe to say he's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Okay. Last guy that I think we should cover before we start getting into our personal guys that we are driving the bus for is Aaron Jones. He had 2 submissions, and at first I thought it was kind of funny that Aaron Jones would be a guy you would feel you had to drive the bus for. Like, oh, I'm higher on him than everybody else is, but there is a perception with him being toward the end of his career, just age wise. This is roughly where people are starting to expect him, that you kind of feel like sort of any year now you're going to start to see that drop off. Wisco Fanatic says this is kind of cheating, but Aaron Jones is my pick. He's criminally underrated in the NFL, and with Rodgers out of town, he'll be able to shine even more than he already has. And I think maybe the argument here is that the Packers are going to run the ball more without Aaron Rodgers. But I guess I have a little bit of a hard time, picturing that Matt LaFleur, longtime quarterbacks coach, is going to want to shy away from passing the ball. I mean, I think that, yeah, Jordan Love is a downgrade from what Aaron Rodgers historically has been, but Aaron Rodgers wasn't throwing the ball very well last year, and it didn't seem like there was a notably heavier run emphasis last year. Ryan, do you have any thoughts on Aaron Jones breaking out in terms of usage? You think it's going to be an Aaron Rodgers effect that causes him to have a better season than he has had?
Yeah, I think that's the expectation for a lot of people is Aaron Jones is finally going to get the Dalvin Cook carries, so he's going to break all the records, and we're finally going to show everybody what he's really made of. The fantasy football people will finally know. But yeah, I don't really think that's going to happen. There might be a slight uptick, but they could have leaned on Aaron Jones at any point. I'm not even talking about, we didn't run very much. You could have run A.J. Dillon or Jamal Williams less and given more to Aaron Jones, but they chose to go kind of 50-50, and a part of that is we want Aaron Jones to be fresh by the end of the year. So they're not going to cram 30 carries down his throat, through the first 6 weeks just because we need to run the ball more. I did hear some people say that maybe you'll see A.J. Dillon get more carries as a result of that. We do want the higher carries, but we want to keep Aaron Jones fresh. So maybe there's that, but again, I don't necessarily think we're going to be running the ball a ton more. But if you do think so, then yeah, I think there might be a case for A.J. Dillon seeing a little bit more of an uptick than Aaron Jones will. I think Aaron Jones is going to be on the same program he has been. He's going to get his 12, 13, 14, 15 carries, and they're going to do that until the end of the year, and then you see a slight uptick. And, if we get into the playoffs, that's when you start to see more. But I think it's going to be the same old for Aaron Jones.
As a runner last year, Aaron Jones had his highest running grade of his career last year, 90.7. Didn't have any really more attempts than he has had in past years, hovering right around the 200 attempts mark like he always is, but he did have the most yards of his career, second highest. It's funny, you could say second highest yards per attempt, but that's because the first is a three-way tie. 2017, 2018, and 2020, all the 3 years, he had 5.5 yards per attempt.
Yeah.
So last year, 5.3. He did have the second highest yards after contact per attempt last year. He was a darn good runner. The concern that he had there, number one, the touchdowns just were not there. They were not materializing, partly because the offense itself, on the whole, wasn't that effective. But 2 total rushing touchdowns on the season. The fumbles were also up, 5 total fumbles on the year. Very poor fumble grade, 37.4. I think that would be an area for him to focus on cleaning up, especially since that's not an age-related thing. That's just, that's something you can fix. So I think that in terms of, the production, nothing really to indicate that he's going to go backwards. I like the fact that he had his best rushing grade of his entire career last year. I think he's still got another year or 2 left in him at peak efficiency. So I'd like to see it. Travis Jackson was the other guy on Twitter who nominated Aaron Jones, and he said that he thinks Jones is going to have over 2,000 all-purpose yards and 20-plus touchdowns and will be in the MVP conversation.
You know
so
what? You know what?
Save that for last. Because
Love it.
You
Let's
can't
go.
top that.
I appreciate the bold takes. I will say Aaron Jones, third in rushing yards over expectation last year. That's pretty run of the mill. It's been him and Nick Chubb leading the way in rushing yards over expectation for the last, 4 or 5 years now, it feels like. So has he always been, a really good running back? Yeah. I mean, and I don't think I see that changing necessarily, right? Like I think he had like 30 rushing yards over expectation against Buffalo, who had allowed like minus 100 before all season before they played Green Bay. It's like I think he's still criminally underrated. And I know Ryan talked about this last week, with running backs and their value. I think Aaron Jones is honestly, Green Bay might be getting him at a discount with that pay cut, with just how effective he has been. So yeah, I mean, love the bold take, love the MVP conversation thing. That's very fun. I don't see the drop off either. I think, like you said, Jada, I think there's still a couple more years left in him for sure.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, Jake, you're going to take it away, and we are going to get into who you are driving the bus for this season. All right, Jake, we are each picking one offensive and one defensive player to drive the bus for this year. Can you kick us off with your offensive player?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate a few things. I know we covered him earlier in the show, but Jayden Reed was the guy. Just because I do think, like, when they drafted and the draft was done, I was like, oh wow, I was really excited for Wicks, and I still am. But I think the more that, like, I brought this up earlier is, like, the Packers went outside their thresholds for this guy, and it wasn't by a lot, but it was by enough to, I think, raise some eyebrows, especially being picked, in the top 50. So that's, I think, something that should kind of prick the ears up a little bit and be like, all right, well, this is real. I think, and like I've said, I mean, I think Watson's really probably the only other player who's as dynamic as Reed is in the receiving room. I think you look at Romeo Doubs as, like, kind of really, I would call him, if you had to call anybody the X in the offense, it's probably Doubs, just because I think he is the guy you can be trusted to, like, all right, it's going to be no nonsense. The routes over the middle of the field, he's going to get into that intermediate area and win a lot. I think that's, like, the dependable type of player that he is. But, like, in terms of, like, all right, we're going to give you, this play on jet motion, you're taking this reverse. You're going to do a lot of different things for us, to kind of mess with defenses, give us the looks we want, see what kind of coverage or what kind of defense teams are in, and also be a part of, the quick passing game, intermediate and downfield. I think he's going to be a part of all of it. And I think, still at this point, whose hands would I trust more, right? Watson's or Reed's? I'm not saying Watson hasn't gotten better, but I think Reed provides, still that reliability, go up and win the football for a guy who's, obviously a little bit smaller than everybody else in the room. I just think when you look at, what Green Bay has kind of committed to, and I don't think, we're going to see this, even if we do see a little bit of kind of run and chuck it down the field a little bit, take some shots. I think Reed's going to be a part of that as well. So I think any way you kind of sculpt the offense in your mind, I think Reed is a part of it no matter what. And I think, you mentioned it earlier about where he is on the depth chart. I'm not worried about that right now. I know Justin Jefferson was number 3 at this point when he was a rookie, and 3 years later, here we are, right? So I'm not too worried about that. I think he becomes an important cog. Will he have a sensational year? I wouldn't say that. I think there's just so many players who are going to get targets in this offense, but I do think, like, you're looking at somebody by end of season. I'll put this on there, who I think can be 2A, 2B. With Doubs, and that's where I'll stick kind of the flag out for Jayden Reed.
Ryan, what do you think about this pick of Jayden Reed? Were you tempted at all to take Jayden Reed for your player?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a fairly good one. The only reason I didn't is because kind of similarly, the hype train's picking up, although it is fair because, again, you got, it kind of is just a cluster at wide receiver. I mean, I would say there's almost more hype for Samori Toure than Jayden Reed right now, which is a little bit crazy. No, but I actually think that was a good way to phrase it, because that's kind of how I'm viewing it right now with 2A and 2B between him and Doubs. And I've been trying to force Reed ahead of him for a long time, just because I think he is everything Doubs is just a little bit better. But Doubs is just so freaking tenacious in the way that he plays. He's put in so much work. the way that he's able to go up and get the ball and fight for those contested catches, the work that he's put in with Love, and obviously they have a really good connection right now. So despite the fact that I think Jaden Reed is just a more talented and gifted player, like he's faster, he's a better route runner, he's got better hands, all that stuff, I just think Dobbs has established himself as the number 2 right now, so I can't do anything better than 2A and 2B. But that's kind of how I view it. At least, let's say by the end of the season, I think it'll be Watson, and then you've got your 2A and 2B after that.
I love it. Ryan, you are up next. Do you want to take your offensive player or defensive player?
We'll stick offense. Right. It's kind of hard with the whole hype train thing because I'm sure people roll their eyes when I say who it is because like, oh, everybody's high on that. But I took Christian Watson. And the reason is partially because, like I said, I feel like the wide receivers have kind of clustered in the middle. I think if this was, November of last year, I wouldn't be able to say this when there was a hype train by everybody. But I feel like it's really cooled off. Like Packer fans forgot. There was a time last year where everybody, including national media, said that like this guy's a breakout star. He's going to be all these great things. And now it's kind of, I'm even being told to temper my expectations. But that's number one is I haven't tempered my expectations since last year. I don't think that was a fluke. And then beyond that, watching the little clips that I've seen, even, I like to watch him even when it's like a Musgrave clip or whatever. I genuinely think he is a really good route runner, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I think he's seen as just a straight line guy, but you see the way he's able to do pretty much any other route, and I think he is really clean. His acceleration, especially, coming out of these breaks and everything, I just feel like he is such a dangerous weapon. I can't guarantee that this is going to materialize, but, the guy gives me chills when I watch him play. He looks so clean. He just looks like a number 1 wide receiver. You can just kind of see it with some of these guys where they just look different than your, average 2s and 3s or whatever. So, and then the final thing would be Matt LaFleur talking about his intelligence and just like, I don't remember his exact quote, but something to the effect of like, I haven't been around a guy like this that is so freaking intelligent, his grasp of the offense. And that's important for a wide receiver to know exactly how things are supposed to go and what my responsibilities are. So, I did put together a little bit just for some specifics in terms of my expectations. I did a little bit of this on a previous podcast, but so I've been talking about his yards per route run as sort of the baseline of, he didn't get a lot of snaps, but on a per snap basis, he was incredible at 2.26 yards per route run. I didn't use our wide receivers because it was kind of a cluster in terms of, who was the number 1, this, that, or the other. But I looked at the Steelers, who had a rookie quarterback and 2 relatively young wide receivers, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. If you look at his yards per route run and take Deontay Johnson's routes, he would have 1,387 yards. If we do George Pickens, who is number 2, it's 1,311 yards. And I said, okay, well, let's say it's not 2.266. Let's bring it down to 2 yards per route run and then go with the wide receiver 2 routes. It's still 1,160 yards. So I'm going to go on the very conservative side of it, and I'm going to say he gets over 1,100 yards. And then when I looked at touchdowns, I did something very similar. I removed anywhere where it was more than 1 touchdown. So he had 3 touchdowns in one game, 2 touchdowns in another. And I said, let's just make those 1. If you take that and then still do the same thing with the amount of routes run, I've got him at 13 touchdowns, which is 9 receiving touchdowns and 4 rushing touchdowns, however you want to break it down, whatever. But 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns for Christian Watson. I think he firmly establishes himself not only as wide receiver 1 for the team, but one of the premier receivers in the league this year.
I like your math. I really do. I looked up that quote by Matt LaFleur. He said, Christian Watson is one of the most intelligent players I've ever been around, especially at the wide receiver position. So take that, Devontae.
Yeah, he also said he inferred wide receivers are stupid there, but anyways. Especially wide receiver, let me tell you.
Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I feel like with a lot of stuff we've been seeing on social media lately, it's the running backs, the really big name running backs around the league are the ones who are posting the stuff on Twitter that just makes me scratch my head. Like, how does that make sense to you? I don't know.
Yeah, that's why they don't get paid.
Ryan Heath, sadly, he's not one of my followers on Twitter. He's a smart fantasy football guru out there that I found. Put up a cool chart. I guess he works for Fantasy Points Data. Cool chart that shows actual fantasy points per route run over expected fantasy points per route run. Expected fantasy points per route run puts Christian Watson exactly in line with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Devontae Adams. This is solely 2022 that we're looking at here. It's not projected for 2023. It's what he did last year. It's exactly in line with St. Brown and Adams, but he outperformed actual fantasy points per route run over expected more than any other receiver in the league. He outperformed Cooper Kupp. He had almost 0.7 fantasy points per route run. That's the highest in the NFL. Crazy. This is a guy I'm targeting in fantasy. If you can't, if you can't tell, this is my strategy. Since we kind of jumped the gun and read some of the Jaden Reed submissions on the Twitter thread before we got to Jake, we got to get caught up on the Christian Watson ones now. Joe at work says Christian Watson. Do you think Joe at work is Joe the janitor? Just wonder.
Probably.
Christian Watson was my favorite player in the 2022 draft class, not just among the guys Green Bay drafted. Jake K says Christian Watson. Nobody is talking about how he might be good. He's going to be a stud and will go off. How about 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns if he stays healthy? I like it.
There you go.
Is that just receiving or is that all purpose? Maybe it's not clarified.
I think you have to infer what you want from it.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Do we think Christian Watson is going to have another big role in the rushing game this year, or is he? I noticed they're using Jaden Reed a lot in practice on those end rounds and jet sweeps and stuff. I mean, is this just kind of what Matt LaFleur is doing to work in his second round wide receivers, or is he still going to use Christian Watson like that this year?
I think what's really interesting, and I wanted to really hit on this as well, like what Ryan talked about is getting better as a route runner. And I think that has kind of stemmed from how elusive and flexible he looks, changing direction while maintaining speed, especially at North Dakota State when he was, being used in the jet motion stuff. And they were asking him to make plays after the catch. And I think that level of flexibility, right, while maintaining that speed is like something that, as soon as he gets, further integrated into how to approach things as a route runner, it's going to get better. Now, back to what you were talking about, I think it's hard to argue with the results when he's getting the ball in these situations. Like, I mean, you give him one, in the Minnesota game, it looks like he's just running at a different speed than everybody else on the dang field. Like you give him, the ball against New England, it looks easy. You give him the ball against Chicago, it looks so easy where he's just outrunning everybody. And I know it was on a passing play, but the Philly touchdown, it's like when a guy can get to the corner faster than everybody, maintain that speed on a curvilinear track, and then just out sprint people to the end zone, there's just absolutely no way you can't, give him the ball in some of these scenarios. Because, I mean, Alan Lazard's not here anymore to take those jet sweeps, and key down. So, might want to be Watson in those scenarios. I just think there's just the results speak for themselves. And I do agree with kind of what you said, JJ. I think it's just more of getting Reed involved. And I think Reed can be a part of that. But I think what makes this offense a ton of fun is that Reed and Watson can both be used in those situations. Mm-hmm. And if Watson's getting better as a route runner, that means now you have two players who are pretty interchangeable in terms of how they're positioned within the offense, which makes it even more difficult for defenses to handle.
What I would really like to see for Christian Watson is one of my concerns last year was, with his slight frame, it seemed like it didn't take a lot to bang him up. I'd like to see a little more muscle on him this year, see if he can, kind of roll with some of those punches a little bit more. I think he has the frame to carry, more bulk, more muscle, be able to take those hits. And, at that point, I mean, you see a lot of other Packers analysts trying to project Christian Watson as just a continuation of MVS, as that Z receiver. And I'm like, I kind of just want to see him as our X, and I know that, looking at what he did last year. I think he laid a lot of good groundwork for that. But he has that big frame. You know, he's not just a speed demon. Tall, lanky. I think that he has that frame. He could carry more of that muscle and box guys out. And I would like to see that largely so that we can see him on the field, for the whole year, as opposed to, he missed time twice last year due to injury. I think that was, by far the biggest negative that we had from Christian Watson's, really awesome rookie season was just that, hey, 2 different times we're missing him for, an extended period of time, both in the preseason and during the regular season due to, just injuries that he's sustaining. I'd like to see that be a thing of the past. So that's the step I'd like to see him take. I loved what he did on the field last year. And, to your point, really love, seeing how quickly it's crazy watching how fast he has been developing, since he got to the league from a, little FCS school. And now he's not just playing and hanging with the big boys, he's making them look silly. So I love that. I think that, the intelligence that Gutekunst and LaFleur praise so often, I think that shows up on the field when you just look at how quickly he is getting better by leaps and bounds.
How about this for a prediction? Since you brought up the whole Watson or Reed, who's going to be running it? How about both on the same play on a reverse? How about that? Give it to Reed. Reed gives it to Watson flying the other direction.
Man.
Huh? Mark me down for that one as a prediction.
Man.
Broken ankles all over the field.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to take my offensive player now, and I was really torn. We were about 3 or 4 minutes into the podcast when I finally decided who I was going to go with between these 2 guys. I'm actually taking A.J. Dillon as my guy that I'm driving the bus for, and I think it's a really easy case to make. He was the 2nd highest graded player on the Packers offense last year behind Aaron Jones. His rushing grade, 88.1, just behind Aaron Jones's. He had about 30 fewer attempts than Aaron Jones on the year, and about 400 fewer yards, more touchdowns, less fumbles. A lot of people are frustrated with A.J. Dillon, and I think that some of that probably stems from the fact that he wasn't getting used a lot early on in games. He was, kind of more of the finisher when they were finishing games, which wasn't often. And then the drops in the receiving game, I think, were a frustration for a lot of people. He had 5 drops, and some of those really came in some frustrating moments. So I think that the sort of fan base wide disappointment and disillusionment with A.J. Dillon is not wholly justified. I think he had a lot better year than most people give him credit for. Now, he did not crack 800 yards. I think this year, it's a contract year for him. He's not a first round pick, so you don't get that 5th year option for him. Next year, this year he's going to be playing on that 4th year, and he's looking for a big payday. And I think that the Packers, they're allocating a lot of money to Aaron Jones right now, and they're paying. I think the Packers are still the team that is paying the most money to the running back position in the league this year. I know for sure they were last year. They're not going to want to give a big payday to A.J. Dillon if they don't think that he's the future. And I think A.J. Dillon is going to really set out to prove that he is the future of the running back position in Green Bay. So I'm looking for that contract year boost. I think that 1,000 yards is a very attainable goal, but I'm looking for him to smash that. I'm gonna say 1,200 yards for A.J. Dillon. I think he's gonna have more carries than Aaron Jones. So those are my 2 predictions for him. And I think that by the end of the year, although I'm not expecting any statistical or performance-based drop-off for Aaron Jones, I'm looking for A.J. Dillon to steal work from Aaron Jones. He's got the big body to do it. I think that, Aaron Jones does not need as many carries as he gets, frankly, these last couple of years. So I would like to see A.J. Dillon be that bell cow back I'm calling 1,200 yards and more rushing attempts than Aaron Jones this year. And he's only 30 off last year. He had 185 attempts, and Jones had like 214. So I think that's very doable. So, AJ Dillon, do you guys think that I'm crazy for my 1,200 yard prediction? And do you think that this is a good pick or a silly pick?
Dillon's a great pick. 1,200 is bold. That's what I'll say.
I will say, I think, to go back to what you said, I think there's negative discourse around AJ Dillon, and I'll put my hand up. I'm definitely one of those people because of where he was drafted, and I think I'll put my hands up. It's me. I'm the one of the callers in that scenario for sure, and have been for a couple seasons now. I'll admit it, and that has been totally incorrect, and just absolutely egregiously terrible take from me. I'll admit it, but I will say, I mean, 0.27 rushing yards over expected per attempt. That's 17th in the league. That's pretty darn respectable for an RB2 behind Aaron Jones. 1,200 is it's out there. I will say I have probably made the
1,000 feels really attainable, doesn't it?
Depending on how the offense looks, yeah, I do think so. 1,000 definitely feels like it could be. Will they be in more 21 perhaps? Will they have both of them out there? Are they? I think justifiably trusting Aaron Jones more as a receiver. I think so. I mean, when you look at the time that Jordan Love was out there, they're running stick with Aaron Jones running a vertical in that stick concept. Like that was one of the plays, Jordan Love gets against Philly. So I think they trust Jones more as a receiver. And, if they're really hesitant on playing through receivers, we might get to see, a little bit of action with both of them out there. And that might favor Dillon in terms of obviously, stuff on the ground. But obviously he is, I think, honestly, probably only hasn't lived up to the billing of a second-round pick only because Jones is there. I think that's really the only reason. Otherwise, I think that a lot of people would be coming around on him a lot more.
Would you guys give this to me on a technicality if Dillon's receiving yards put him over 1,200? Because he had 206 receiving yards last year.
I was going to ask
Sure.
if you're going all purpose or not. I was going to ask that once you said it.
That makes sense.
All right.
That's what you meant. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys finally understand what I clearly was saying.
We're so stupid. I'm sorry.
I totally forgot to mention last year, Jones had a 70.3 pass blocking grade as well. I think that's, criminally underappreciated, when you're looking at just the stuff people, say about Dillon. I mean, there genuinely are Packer fans that I have talked to who are talking about, dude, like this is clearly Dillon's last year with the team. Maybe you should try and flip him for, like a 4th round pick or something. And a lot of folks are ready to move on from him. I don't get it. I think he played really well last year. It was not the year 3 leap that we were looking for sure. And then the fact that you have Aaron Jones there, who I think a lot of us, myself included, were really hoping you were going to see AJ Dillon become RB1 last year in his 3rd year. And, unfortunately for AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones just played out of his mind. And it's hard to catch a guy who starts out ahead of you and is a freak and is working his butt off. Anyways, there we go. So let's flip it back to who went first? Jake, you went first. So you have your defensive player left. I guess all 3 of us have defensive players left. So take it away, Jake.
Okay. So I'm going to, I think, ride for somebody. I feel like he's probably not being talked about a lot because of kind of the approach Green Bay's had in the last couple of drafts. And I'll explain, I think, why that's maybe favors this guy a little bit. But I'm going to go with TJ Slayton as the guy I'm going to drive the bus for. And I think it really, for me, came down to when you brought up this idea, I was like, all right, I got to figure out who the heck I'm going to pick on defense. It just felt like trending towards both Georgia defenders was an easy call, and I think a fine call to make. I really do. I think both are really, really great candidates. But I think pointing a few things out schematically is why I'm going to lean Slayton as my guy here. I think the first thing is how effective Green Bay's defense was when they got into the 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 type of things, where they could just unload on people with pressure. They get in the face of receivers. There was a lot of just disruption all over the field, and that made them one of the better, above average 3rd down defenses. How do you get there? How do you get to that point? you have to stop early down success rate. And unfortunately for Green Bay, that comes on the ground, and it has for a long time. And really, I think what makes me even more, high on a guy like TJ Slayton is just the approach in the draft for the Packers the last couple of years. They had opportunities. There were plenty of one-text nose tackles they could have selected. Instead, where have they gone? They've gone Enigbare, Wyatt, Brooks, Wooden, Lucas Van Ness, all guys who are primarily pass rushers at heart that can kind of move around a little bit on the defense. What they still, kind of lacked, and a lot of people were like, all right, well, are we going to go this way in the draft at all? Look at a guy like, if Jordan Davis falls, would they take a player like Jordan Davis? Travis Jones was the other guy in that 2022 draft who a lot of people are like, all right, this is the one tech, the nose tackle that you want to have, if you're in the mid rounds, if you want to discount Jordan Davis. Last year, there was a lot of talk, Mozzie Smith, tremendous athlete. He fits the bill because Ika doesn't, because Ika's not a great athlete. Gutekunst loves the big-time athletes no matter the position. Are they going to go get Mozzie Smith? They didn't. They really haven't added anybody. And I know that Barry wants to get to the point where they can just unload with a rotation of guys getting after the quarterback. Where does that start? Like I said, coming back full circle, it starts with stopping early down success rate. I think TJ Slayton is going to make the strides to help them do that. He's probably not going to have, the massive amount of snaps that other guys are going to have. Truthfully, on the season, I think he had, 333 last year. That's well down the list. But I will, with the prediction, say that he is a top 5 graded defender this year for the Packers. Top 5 in grade for the Packers this year, because I think it's just, I think we should listen to all right, they haven't added anybody at this specific position. Now I know schematically it isn't, it doesn't trend to what they like to do, but I think Slayton is going to be crucial if this defense is going to take a step, because they have to get better on first and second down. And I think Slayton, when you look at him, last year, I think there were some bright spots. There's still inconsistencies, no doubt about it, especially honestly in somewhat of the tackling department, especially early in the season. There were some bad games tackling wise, but I think there's a little bit to unlock as a pass rusher. I think he got a lot better in terms of the bull rush, in terms of where he leveraged his hands in the bull rush. It looked a lot cleaner. It looked a lot cleaner with him shedding blocks. I think he's just really honing technique a little bit better as the season went on, and he got a little bit on a heater the last 6 or so games of the season, maybe minus the Rams game. I think there's stuff to unlock. I think I'm going to call it here. He doubles his pressures. He had 5 last season, which is, it's a nose tackle. You don't normally see those guys pressuring the quarterback at a high rate. I'm going to say he doubles the pressures to 10. And I think, like I said, I think he's going to be a big focal point in what they do on early downs.
Ryan, any thoughts on the TJ Slayton pick? I will note TJ Slayton received 0 fan votes.
As I've been poking around and as he's been talking, I'm feeling more and more like that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like I've been pretty low on Slayton for a while, and I think it's mostly because the fan base has been so extreme in the this guy's going to be great. He's a 5th round pick, and everybody's telling he's a 5th round pick that's 330 pounds. Everyone's telling me he's going to be a premier pass rusher. So immediately I just check out and I'm like, forget it. This guy, it ain't going to be a thing. But the same case for Slayton can be made for Myers, which I know nobody on the planet is making because nobody likes Myers. But Myers made a big jump from year 1 to year 2, whether nobody noticed it or not, and he's going into year 3, which is the big year where everybody supposedly figures things out. Slayton went from a 44 run defense grade to a 62 grade. If you just look at the 62, it's like, no, he's not that good. That's a big jump. If he makes that same jump, he's in the 80s. I'm not saying he's going to. Then, like you mentioned, his tackling was, he had a horrible 34 tackling grade. That was just because of 2 games, week 5 and week 1. So like you said, after that, he was fine. He didn't have any issues tackling, and I wanted to look at it. I'll do it later. I'll probably investigate this more after we're done. But after week 7, he was solid. He had 1 bad game. He had pretty much 70s almost the entire time after that in week 7. So, that makes sense. That I'm on board. I hate to admit it, but I'm on board. He might have had a better pick than me, darn it.
Let's find out who your pick is, because you are up next.
Yeah, so I went with Lucas Van Ness. again, kind of iffy on where I am compared to the rest of the fan base, but it does feel like, considering he's a first-round pick, there isn't as much hype. I mean, you hear about Musgrave, you hear about all these other guys. Nobody's really talking about Van Ness as much as you would expect, considering what he is and everything. But I think I really became a big believer in Lucas Van Ness when I saw, and I know it's just a couple clips, but when I got to watch him on those family night clips and a few other of the practice clips, holy cow. Like, not only, I mean, we knew he was powerful, right? And you saw that immediately. I mean, he made Zach Tom look like a little boy. He just pushed him around like he was nothing. But the fluidity, like he's pretty loose for, I mean, he's massive compared to the other guys when you watch him stand there. But then you see how quick he moves, kind of similar to Christian Watson, where you watch him and go, that just looks like a really good pass. That looks like a number one pass rusher. When I saw Van Ness, and you know, again, you see the other guys, you see Kingsley. I like Kingsley and all that. He doesn't look like that in any way, shape, or form. You see Hollins doesn't look like that, right? He's trying, you know, he's doing the whole, like, he's trying to get around him. Lucas Van Ness, he's faster, he's more agile, and he just pushes people out of his way. So I'm all in. We'll see when training camp comes on. Maybe it'll lose a little bit of that luster, but I actually think, even though he's probably going to remain edge 3, because he's not going to edge out Preston or Rashawn, he may get a little bit of an uptick if Rashawn's on kind of a snap count. We'll see. I do expect him to be edge 3, probably by week 1. If he's not, I'm just going to be freaking annoyed, because I know it's garbage and nonsense. But I'll say this as far as my prediction. It's the best I can do because we don't have any stats to work with. He's going to have a better rookie year than Rashawn. And I don't just mean that in terms of his stats, because Rashawn didn't play much. His grades are going to be higher. His pressure rate's going to be higher. Rashawn had a 54 grade, and he had rated about a 10% pressure rate, which actually isn't bad for rookies. If you look at a lot of the other guys, that's kind of where they're at. I'm going to say it is above 11%. And so if you look at where Kingsley Enagbare was, he had 255 snaps. He would be around 30 pressures if that was the case. So that's kind of what I'm gunning for, somewhere around 11 or higher percent. And I think he's going to be kind of getting near that 70 PFF grade as a rookie.
I'm all about this because Lucas Van Ness, although my heart said that I wanted Jackson Smith and Jigba in the draft, my draft board said otherwise. My draft board had Lucas Van Ness as the number 1 best prospect in the entire 2023 NFL draft. So I am beyond thrilled that he's here, and I think that he has the physical skills and the, you know, tools in his arsenal of, you know, talents that he has learned to be an impact this year. I'm all about this. I'm absolutely thrilled that we not only have him here, but that we are in a very different spot than we were in 2019. You know, it's like a blessing in disguise. Hey, we don't have, you know, this dynamic duo of Za'Darius and Preston, or even Rashawn and Preston blocking Lucas Van Ness. Okay, we have a huge opportunity here for Lucas to go out in year 1 as early as week 1 and make a name for himself. So, you know, not being blocked by guys ahead of you can be an awesome thing. So I'm really excited for Lucas.
I'll go one further. I think if he had the chance to start this year, he would 100% get defensive rookie of the year votes. I believe that. I just think, the path is really unfortunate for him. He's kind of basically in the same position he was at Iowa. There are just guys ahead of him. Now, I think, you know, the Packers, it's a little different because they have guys who are, you know, rightfully good starters ahead of him, right? Like it's not like, you know, and it was at Iowa where the lesser talented guys are on the field because they're just older, and that's how it goes. But the more I dug in, once he was drafted, because again, when you're doing the draft, it's just hard to get through, like, you know, 10 games of a guy, you know. Right. But the further you get in, it's just like, no, every week he's just literally overwhelming people because he's just that much stronger than everybody. And I think you made a great point that, Ryan, that like everybody loves the shiny new toys at the skill positions because we drafted so many. So there's like all this hype because, oh man, we draft all these guys. Like, look at the tight ends. That's fair. And it's like all these flashy things at a car show where Van Ness is just going to be probably just be the best pick that Green Bay makes, especially because everybody wanted Kincaid or JSN instead of him. That's often how it goes with the Packers in these picks. It's just especially when people really wanted somebody else. like really badly wanted somebody else that you go, oh yeah, that just it works. He's just the best pick they made. It was really a no doubter when you kind of widened your vision a little bit on things. It didn't hone in on one specific position for the Packers to select. It just feels like if Preston Smith wasn't there, Rookie of the Year votes. I really think that would be the case.
Van Ness got 2 fan votes. One from Jeff Machete. He said Lucas Van Ness is a clone to Rashawn Gary. I kind of see it. I think he's more of a young J.J. Watt, but I see the Rashawn Gary similarities. Says he's a tremendous step-to-power guy who is going to be scary when he develops a pass rush repertoire. And then Carter H. says simply Van Ness for Defensive Rookie of the Year. So I like it.
I like the Max Crosby comp. Somebody threw that out at one point, and I really like that one as well. One. I just think, Crosby's got the wicked spin move. I think Van Ness can get there, but it's nowhere close. I just think athletically, lengthwise, power-wise, like it's there. It is there.
Does he need the spin move though? Because couldn't he? Just
probably won't
pick up the dude and throw him?
I don't think so.
I
don't think so. See, that's the difference. Like when Ryan said it, it's like he moves different, right? Like guys like Enigbare, they have to have the plan because they're not athletically gifted enough to just run around or through or whatever. Like you have to have a plan, right? And that's often how it goes with a lot of these like more artists and pass rushers. They aren't freaks. Van Ness is a freak. He could probably he's going to have opportunities, to get better in that area. You just got to overwhelm you.
My only recommend
some of those. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the only thing I would ask is that if he does develop a spin move, if we could just call it the twirl, that would be great.
Why the twirl?
The Office. Don't worry about it. Go on. It was stupid. Just go ahead and do your thing.
Oh, dang it.
There'll be plenty of others who get that.
Which episode is that?
That was when Michael Scott was going to give his speech, and he spun around and did the guns. And they were like, drop the twirl. And he's like, it's not even a twirl, it's a spin. I might do the spin.
I remember that. That was awesome. Look, if he develops the twirl, I mean,
yes.
What advice can you give to your tackle? Just good luck. hang in there for dear life. And, hey, we're going to get some holding penalties. Oh, well.
I think the only thing you could say to your tackle is, I hope you're Trent Williams. That's probably it. That's all I think that's all I'm going to say on that. If you're not, sorry. It stinks.
I hate that we have to play Trent Williams as often as we do. Anyways, moving on. All right. My last pick is Devontae Wyatt. Last year, this was like my dude in the draft, and I was just crushed and heartbroken when we took Quay Walker, not because I disliked Quay, but I just thought there was no way that Devontae was going to make it 6 picks to the next time we were on the clock. So the fact that we got him at 28, I was so happy. Then we signed Jaron Reed, and I had to watch Devontae sit behind Jaron Reed all year, and it just made me so angry. And watching our defensive line last year, and you hear, and I'm not singling you guys out if you have said this, but I hear other people say all the time that they're, concerned about our defensive line. And I can't get there. I don't share those same concerns. I'm like, dude, I don't think it's a negative that we don't have Jaron Reed other than from a depth standpoint of if we have a few injuries and we're missing all the guys that I want on the field. I don't think that it's a negative that Jaron Reed and Dean Lowry are gone, even though I did like Dean Lowry. Devontae Wyatt was already the best graded defensive tackle on the team last year. And that's not saying a lot because the second highest graded guy was Kenny Clark with a 66 overall grade, 53 friggin' run defense grade, 47 tackling grade. Anyways, my prediction for Devontae Wyatt is I think he will again be the highest graded defensive tackle on the team. I think, looking at his season last year, a lot of his best graded games came late in the year when he was getting more attempts. He did, the one stinker game that he had was week 12 against Philadelphia. Our entire defense just had no idea what they were doing that whole day. He turned in a 36.8 grade against Philly that day. It was his worst performance of the year. He had his only missed tackle of the season. But, I mean, the dude's stats last year in the limited time that he was out there on the field were really darn good. He only played about 100 run defense snaps, 100 pass rush snaps. He had 9 solo tackles, 4 assists, a forced fumble, 5 run stops, 2 sacks, 5 hurries, 1 hit, 8 total pressures. He was kind of a force when he was out there. And I think that, it's a position Matt LaFleur has talked about it a bunch. Jerry Montgomery, bless his soul, has talked about it a bunch, that this is one of the harder positions, in their opinion, in the NFL to learn, is how to play, interior defensive line. I think having that year under his belt is only going to be a good thing for him. There's kind of just nobody in his way, and he has been kind of the monster we were hoping to see so far all preseason, just manhandling everybody he goes up against. Family night, just making who was it? It was Zach Tom and Josh Myers. I think he made their lives hell that day. So just every time I see him, there's guys on this team who I'm really hyped up about. And then you see him and it's like, some good, some bad. Not Devontae Wyatt. Every time I see anything from him, I'm like, yep, okay, this is what I was hoping to see from him at this point. You're just kind of confirming the optimism that I placed in you. So Devontae Wyatt, I think he's going to, by the end of the year, have kind of just played to a point where that sort of question cloud surrounding him right now that people have is going to have evaporated. There's just not going to be any question about, Kenny and Devontae, those are the dudes. I think, Devontae, I think he is going to play at a higher level than Kenny will. Now, Kenny had a higher pressure rate, so that's the one area where I want to see Wyatt catch up to him. But he's already ahead, from a grade standpoint, everywhere else last year. So this is kind of where I'm looking to see the improvement is in his overall pressure rate. His pass rush grade was really good, 71 last year. That's the one area where he was, as I mentioned, behind Kenny, was in both pressures and pressure rate, pressure grade. Sorry, he was behind Kenny, but everywhere else, I think that my stance here, my prediction is that he is going to maintain that high level of play that he had last year and have fewer of the sort of the bottom falling out of everything games like he had last year in week 16 against Miami and week 12 against Philly. Those are kind of the 2 stinker games that, prevented him from having a really elite grade on the whole season. So he's my dude.
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, he's the only person that I've ever had a draft crush on that the Packers picked. So I'm super stoked about Devontae Wyatt. But
and
the crazy. Oh, well, yeah, I guess that was in the last 2 weeks, but because SIS said he was great, and I'm like, oh, all right. No, but the crazy thing about Wyatt is it's not just that he's winning a lot. The ratio of pass rush wins to pass rushes where he pancakes an offensive lineman feels like it's 1-to-1. I mean, he doesn't just win; he freaking obliterates people. I'm offensive linemen are doing backwards somersaults every single time I'm seeing highlights of Devontae Wyatt. So, I mean, he is a special kind of human. And then the other cool thing I was looking at, if you look at how he finished the season, right? He had 8 pressures on 111 attempts. That's not super great. But of those 8 pressures, 5 of them came in the last 4 weeks. And if you just look at those last 4 weeks, it was a almost 14% pressure rate. So, I mean, he really started to come on strong. And that was when he started actually getting more opportunities. He didn't even crack 10 or 20 snaps or whatever until week 12 against Philadelphia. So, yeah, the only reason I didn't
30 snaps a game in the last 3 weeks.
Right, yeah. So he's already getting ramped up, and maybe that honestly has something to do. I mean, I know we drafted some guys, but why we got rid of the guys that we got, right? If Wyatt's no good, we might need to hang on to Lowry for another year or something, So no, but the only reason I didn't want to touch Wyatt is because I think everybody sees it, and we're all starting to get excited about it. But there's every reason to, because he's reminding me a little bit of Rashawn when he got into camp, and there were just reports that Bakhtiari cannot stop Za'Darius and Rashawn. It's just they can't stop him, and that's what we're hearing about Wyatt right now in camp. Is basically nobody can stop the guy.
I see that other people are high on him, and it just didn't chase me away because I feel like I was driving that bus all year last year, and so I feel like I deserve to still have the keys to that bus this year. I'm gonna just keep
Still
driving
my
that
bus.
same bus from last year.
I painted it. I restored it. My bus.
Get off my bus.
So you guys
Wyatt's
had
a freak, really quick. Wyatt's a freak. I mean, like legitimately, like the athletic, like measurables and all that compared to Quinnen Williams. And we know how good Quinnen Williams has become. It took him time though, which I think JG pointed out. It's a tough position to learn because in college, you can just be like, well, I can just overwhelm people. I can just, attack, right? Like they're asking me to just, this is my gap. I'm attacking it. Like I'm getting upfield. There's not a lot of like, they're not focused really on a lot of gap integrity, even though it is still Georgia. They just know they're bigger, stronger, faster than everybody that's going to be in front of them. So they don't really, it doesn't have to be as technical necessarily. And that's where the learning curve starts. But like, if there was no Jordan Davis in that draft, we'd be talking about Devontae Wyatt's athletic measurables a ton because he was near that level in terms of the freakish nature of how he plays. And that, the 10-yard split's better than a ton of edge rushers, right? Like, how good he is as a pass rusher. And that's, it's coming to fruition. I agree. The bus is huge, but JJ, you have the keys. So.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, we are over an hour at this point, but you guys had mentioned that you wanted like an honorable mention section. So the floor is yours for either one of you. If there's anybody that you want to shout out, that you think deserves honorable mention before we wrap up.
Well, I would, without combing over too many people, the only person I would probably shout out is Quay. I think maybe deserves some love on this. I think he looks really good. I mean, we already know how talented and athletic he is, but his movement ability, just in the little bit that we've seen him, and I think the second year in the system, I genuinely expect a relatively sizable leap. And having Devondre there with him, I think, just helps a ton. He doesn't have to put the whole defense on his back, and really everybody. I mean, the corners, they're so intelligent and talented, as well as the guys up in front of him. So he's in such a great situation. And I think he's going to have, with a better understanding, the ability to just put that athleticism to work. And I hate to say, like with so many people, I expect a big jump, but I really see him and expect for him to be a established quality linebacker amongst Packer fans this year.
Yeah, at a lot of positions, it makes sense to expect a huge jump, though, because we're shedding, old vets who were hogging up a bunch of snaps. And, like, now you got all these young freaks who have been waiting their time who are unblocked. So a huge jump makes perfect sense at, basically every position except for linebacker. You could apply that argument. I do still think Quay is going to have a great year, but, he's kind of the one young guy who just wasn't blocked at all.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think a lot of it with linebacker is so much when you get to the league, everything. I almost said it starts here. I forget where this is audio only. It's eyes and it's trusting like what you have learned and all the experience you have. Like there is such a difference with. Again, it's the Georgia defense. Guess what? Walker's going to have a lot of free lanes. Why? There are 3 effing studs in front of him. Like 3 dudes who went in the first, and 2 of them were top 15. Like this is, he's going to be able to run, chase, and just run through people because he's that fast and that strong. But again, all of the deception, all of the window dressing that's thrown at linebackers nowadays in this league, you can look to pretty much any offense. It's so much of like, all right, I've seen this before. I know they're trying to get me in this way. I need to be able to be disciplined and I need to stay where I need to be. This is either I'm dropping into this area, this is where I need to cover, or this is my gap. I'm not getting taken out of it. I'm not going to overrun things because, my eyes got big seeing a ball carrier and thinking I can go catch him. So a lot of it is just eyes and just, again, trusting what you've learned to, again, maintain gap integrity in a defense that's going to need you to maintain that. Because, again, if Slayton is just out there for a limited amount of time, which is entirely possible, it's going to be up to kind of the linebackers to kind of step up and say, all right, we need to be a part of, limiting this early down success on the ground. Like, this is our job. And so I think obviously Campbell's going to shoulder a ton of that load, but Walker's going to have to as well. And I think, it's a perfect guy to shout out here at the end.
I had just two guys that I did want to talk about a bit. One, if I didn't have huge questions about if he's going to be able to play at all this year, Eric Stokes would be a guy that I'd be driving the bus for, because I kind of think, I'm zagging when everybody's zigging. His rookie year, I think people maybe make a little bit too much of what he did. And last year, I think they're kind of overly down on what he did. I guess I'm not as high on his rookie season and not as low on his sophomore season as a lot of folks are. And I know that he has talked about his own frustrations and disappointments with how his year 2 went. But, some of the predictive analytics, looking at Eric Stokes, he was one of the stickier corners in the NFL last year when he did play. I think that there is still some untapped stuff there that I really would like to have been able to, see last year and this year. And I just don't know, at what point he's going to be healthy enough to actually get out there on the field and be at 100% again. And then Romeo Doubs is the other guy who I just had a little prediction about him. I think he's going to lead the team in targets. I don't think that's a really wild prediction. I think, a lot of people would have that expectation just based on the chemistry he has with Jordan Love, and the fact that, we're expecting Christian Watson to really be stretching, and Luke Musgrave and Christian Watson just stretching defenses like crazy. And hey, you know what? If you're going to force defenses to choose, they're going to choose to give up a, shorter, easier completion to Dobbs, as opposed to, listen, if that ball gets in Christian Watson's hands, it's probably going to the house. So, do what you can, to make sure that doesn't happen. I think that's just going to create a lot of opportunities for Dobbs, who already has the special connection with Jordan Love. So, I'm not as high on Dobbs's skill set and athletic build, makeup as some folks are, but I really, not only do I think there's a good opportunity for him in this offense, I also really like the way that he's just kind of has a ferocious tenacity to the way that he is approaching his job, and just, the way he puts in, 99 to 100% effort seemingly at all times. I just look at the guys behind him who are trying to get playing time, and I'm like, hey, good luck catching up to Dobbs, because he had a head start on you, and he is working harder than anybody else out there. So, you're really going to have to be special to catch up to him, is all I'm saying.
Dobbs is one of those guys that you're like, when he beats you in anything, you're just so darn frustrated that he beats you, because you're like, you're not faster than me, right? You're not like, right. You're not this freak athlete. You're not like dominating me. Like, you're finding a way to beat me. And it's just, I'm so frustrated that you keep beating me. That's the type of player that Dobbs is. And I really like that about him.
He's the kind of player that makes Justin Jefferson hit referees in the back of the neck with a helmet.
Just like, how does this guy keep beating me? Don't get it.
I forgot about that. That was hilarious. And he didn't even get a flag, did he?
No.
Nothing.
I was accidental. I didn't mean to swing my helmet.
Yeah. Directly into your spine.
Yeah,
it just flew out of my hand, man.
Yeah. I can't control.
All right.
It's out of my control.
At Jake NFL Draft on Twitter, the It's Always Draft Season podcast on the Packernet Podcast Network. If you want to follow ChatGPT, it is at Pack_Daddy. You can catch him on the Packernet Podcast. I am JJ Lahey. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good one.